No one expected the admission to come out that way. The interview was light, almost playful, until Dakota Johnson paused mid-answer and looked away from the host. It wasn't hesitation for effect. It was the kind of pause that signals a decision being made in real time. She smiled briefly, then said the sentence fans had never heard before. "I never talked about this," she began, her tone calm but unusually measured. The studio atmosphere shifted instantly, as if everyone realized they had crossed into territory that wasn't rehearsed. At first, the host assumed it was a harmless anecdote. But Dakota didn't laugh it off or redirect the conversation. She leaned forward slightly, eyes focused, and admitted she had kept something about Jamie Dornan private for years. "Not a rumor, not speculation, a real secret," she said, "one that had never been meant for public consumption." The audience didn't react right away. There was no gasp, no applause. Just silence. Dakota didn't elaborate immediately, and that restraint made the moment heavier than any dramatic reveal could have. Viewers could sense that whatever she was about to reference had been carried deliberately, and carefully, for a long time. Within minutes of the interview airing, clips began circulating online. Headlines focused on the word secret, but those who watched closely noticed something else. Dakota wasn't excited or relieved. She looked resigned, as if finally naming the existence of the secret mattered more than explaining it. Commentators rushed to fill in the gaps. Some assumed it was about their on-screen history. Others speculated about personal boundaries crossed behind the scenes. But Dakota had been precise in one crucial way. She didn't frame it as something scandalous. She framed it as something necessary to keep hidden. As the conversation continued, she clarified that the choice to stay silent hadn't been hers alone. It was an understanding, she implied, formed at a time when speaking out would have done more harm than good. The secret wasn't protected because it was shameful, but because it was fragile. That distinction changed everything. This wasn't about image management or publicity control. It was about timing, vulnerability, and consequences. Dakota emphasized that fans weren't being deceived. They were simply being spared a truth that wasn't ready to exist publicly. The interview ended without further detail, but the damage, or revelation, was already done. Social media lit up with theories, many of them missing the point entirely. The shock wasn't in what was said, but in who said it. Dakota had always been careful with her words, known for her boundaries and selective honesty. If she chose to admit this now, it meant something had shifted. Sources close to the situation later described the confession as overdue rather than impulsive. According to them, Dakota had carried the knowledge quietly through years of speculation, headlines, and narratives she never corrected. Not because they were wrong, but because they were incomplete. What unsettled fans most was the implication that Jamie himself had trusted her with something deeply personal. Something that, if exposed prematurely, could have altered how he was seen. Not just as an actor, but as a person. Dakota's role, then, wasn't passive. She wasn't just aware of the secret. She was responsible for keeping it intact. That responsibility, she hinted, had grown heavier over time. Each new project, each renewed wave of attention, made the silence harder to maintain. The confession didn't come from pressure. It came from a sense that the truth no longer needed protection in the same way. Still, Dakota stopped short of revealing details. She didn't describe the secret itself, only its impact. How it shaped conversations. How it changed the way she viewed certain moments. How it lingered in the background of interactions that appeared effortless on the surface. By the time the interview wrapped, one thing was clear. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a casual admission. It was the first crack in a story fans thought they already understood. And it raised a question that refused to go away. What kind of truth could stay hidden for so long, not out of fear, but out of care? What Dakota didn't say on camera mattered just as much as what she admitted. According to people familiar with the situation, the secret wasn't about romance, betrayal, or anything that fit neatly into tabloid headlines. It was about a moment in Jamie Dornan's life when the version of him the public adored didn't fully exist yet. A period marked by doubt, pressure, and a vulnerability he never allowed to surface publicly. Those who knew Jamie at the time describe him as intensely private, even more so than now. Success had arrived quickly, and with it came expectations he wasn't prepared to navigate out loud. The secret Dakota kept wasn't a single event, but an understanding of how close he came to walking away from everything before things stabilized. Dakota had been there not as a co-star, but as a witness. She saw the uncertainty behind the confidence, the moments where composure felt like an obligation rather than a choice. When she said she kept the secret to protect him, insiders insist she meant it literally. Speaking too soon would have frozen him in a narrative he was still trying to escape. That responsibility altered the dynamic between them. Conversations carried an unspoken layer, one that required caution and trust. Dakota wasn't guarding a scandal, she was guarding timing. And timing, in Hollywood, can determine whether a story destroys or humanizes. For years, the silence held. Jamie rebuilt his footing, project by project, until the fragile version of himself became something sturdier. The public saw confidence and stability. What they never saw was how carefully that image had been earned. The reason Dakota chose to speak now wasn't sudden honesty or media pressure. It was distance. Time had created enough separation between who Jamie was then and who he is now. The secret no longer threatened his sense of self, it contextualized it. Friends say Dakota struggled with the decision longer than anyone realized. Keeping the secret had become part of her own identity in the narrative surrounding him. Releasing it, even partially, meant stepping out of a role she never asked for. But staying silent indefinitely felt dishonest in a different way. That internal conflict surfaced during the interview. When she said she had kept Jamie a secret, her expression wasn't dramatic, it was reflective. She wasn't unburdening herself. She was acknowledging a chapter that no longer needed protection. What shocked fans wasn't the content of the secret, but its nature. They expected something explosive. Instead, they were faced with the idea that the most carefully guarded truths aren't always sensational. Sometimes they're quiet, heavy, and rooted in empathy rather than fear. Jamie, according to sources close to him, wasn't blindsided by the admission. He had been aware Dakota might speak someday, once the context could no longer hurt him. Their understanding had always included that possibility. What mattered was not secrecy forever, but secrecy until it was safe. In the days following the interview, Jamie didn't rush to respond. No statement, no clarification. That silence wasn't avoidance, it was alignment. Those close to him say he recognized the admission for what it was. Not exposure, but release. The secret, now partially revealed, didn't rewrite his story. It softened it. Fans began revisiting his journey with new perspective, noticing moments that once seemed confident now tinged with effort. The revelation didn't diminish him. It made him more real. And that was the twist no one anticipated. The shock didn't come from scandal, but from restraint. From realizing that behind years of speculation and projection, there had been a simpler truth quietly protected by someone who understood its weight. Some secrets are kept to hide wrongdoing. Others are kept to give someone the chance to become who they're meant to be. Dakota's admission didn't end a mystery.